what to say on this last Sunday. Here are the two of us. We've worked together for 8.5 months. We've been partners in crisis and partners in concern, partners in ministry. But this was our first time doing an interim ministry together. And so we had to come to trust each other. We had to talk together. We had to share the leadership. We had to be together in fellowship. We had lots of meals together, didn't we?
Yes, we did. They were wonderful. And you even paid for some of them.
I think this is going to happen throughout, you know. Something tells me. But we've been in this boat together for, these several months. And this morning is not just a shared sermon, which we're doing together for the first time, but it is shared faith. It is shared risk that we're taking. Not knowing when a little zinger of a joke is going to come in, or I'm going to get nudged, or I'm going to say, it's your turn now, take it away. But we are in this boat together, and just in case the water rises, we've got a secret little life raft here under the pulpit, but we're going to ask you to keep the prayer line going the whole time of this sermon until we get to the final blessed amen. What should we use as a text?
Well, I thought maybe we could use 2 Corinthians 13, where Paul says, "Finally, brothers and sisters, farewell. Put things in order. Listen to our appeal. Agree with one another. Live in peace. And the God of love and peace will be with you."
But we're not going to use that.
Or maybe we could use what Paul wrote to the Philippians. "I thank my God every time I remember you, constantly praying with joy in every one of my prayers for all of you because of your sharing of the gospel. And this is my prayer, that your love may overflow more and more with knowledge and full insight, so that in the day of Christ you may be pure and blameless, having produced the harvest of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ for the glory and praise of God."
Well, we're not going to use that either. Maybe we should take a look at the lectionary. Samuel 1, chapter 17 is the story of David and Goliath, a popular story of the young kid against the giant.
And we have faced some giant problems, but we're not going to go there either this morning.
How about 2 Corinthians 6? Paul talks of afflictions, hardships, calamities, beatings, riots, and sleepless nights.
Well, you and I have not been beaten here or experienced riots, but we have had some sleepless nights and some long meetings and some major conflicts.
You know, back in 1886, the pastor of the First Methodist Church, as it would have been called then, was burned in effigy for his support of the Methodist movement against alcohol.
We're grateful that none of you have done that to us. And we're not going to use Paul's list of hardships either. It might give some of you an idea or two.
So it looks like we're left with the 4th chapter of Mark, verses 35 through 41, the well-known story of Jesus and the storm, which was so beautifully demonstrated by our children actors this morning. There have been some storms in our time together, so maybe this is the best text for us to use. Why are you afraid? Have you no faith?
I remember the first time I was in Israel, and we hadn't taken advantage of the Weather Channel, as the front of the bulletin talks about. We took a boat trip across the Sea of Galilee, and it was a sunny day, and all of a sudden while we were out on the lake, the wind suddenly came up, the waves grew in size, the boat began to toss and to roll. And I was reminded of this story. Conclusion of our boat trip, we anchored in a quiet bay, and I read aloud the story of Jesus calming the storm. And for each of us there that day, his words took on new and personal meaning for us. Where is your faith? Where is your trust? Why are you so afraid?
Jesus spoke about moving from fear to faith. How do we do that individually and as a people of God in this congregation? The miracle Jesus showed the disciples was not just the miracle of calming the storm, but the miracle of calming them in the storm. So we asked the question this morning, how do we make it through when the storms of life are raging?
15 million Americans attend 500,000 support groups every week. We are a fearful people, and fear is a powerful motivator. And the bravest among us these days need seatbelts. Now, some of our fears are necessary and they're useful. Fear can also distort reality and tyrannize us and render us ineffective. We need to make a difference between what are legitimate fears and those imagined ones that so often overwhelm us.
The late Bishop Melvin Wheatley, who some of you might have known, was a friend and a colleague of Ken and I, and he had a four-point formula for dealing with stress, for coping with crisis, and for surviving storms.
And sometimes we even listen to bishops, and we even take them seriously. Bishop Wheatley's 4 points were these:
face the worst,
believe the best,
do the most,
and leave the rest. Let's look at each of those this morning. First of all, face the worst. Say that along with me.
Face the worst.
What are we afraid of? Bishop, would you share an experience of fear with us?
I will. Sometimes our fears even surprise us. We're not expecting them. Back in the good old days when I was a youth at the MYF at Lincoln Methodist Church here in Pasadena, and I'm glad to say that because the pastor at the time when I had this unexpected fear was Reverend Harlan Waite, and his wife Anna are here, and his daughter Becky, and I'm so glad that they're here. Just wave, would you? Yeah, here they are down here. Why don't you stand? Yeah, thank you. Reverend Waite hired a youth director whose name was Rex. And he brought with him, from time to time, a very experienced swimming instructor whose name was Marion Coddington. And so she took our youth group down to Brookside Park several times a month, and we learned how to swim there. I was one of those who learned, and she was very particular. She was very meticulous, very thorough, and very patient with us as youth. After it seemed like most of us knew how to swim, we decided to go to the beach, as many youth groups do, and our youth group here has been numerous times. And we got there, and I thought, well, I'm an expert, of course. Isn't that the job of teenagers to know that you're an expert? I was one. I jumped in the water. I said, I'll go out to the buoy, got all the way out to the buoy, and realized I didn't know how to turn around. There was no wall that I could kick off from and get my bearing and go back the other way. Before I knew it, there was seaweed going in front of my face, and I went down over and over and over again. Finally, I felt Marion, the real expert, grab me around my waist and haul me back to the shore, where I felt safe and sound again. I was fearful. I remember that day like it was yesterday. The only faith I had was in dry land.
I remember an experience about 4 years ago when, after a routine medical exam, it was discovered I had a cancer, a malignant cancer on my pancreas. And I know that pancreatic cancer kills people fairly quickly and painfully. Discovered, however, this was an encapsulated cancer on the end of the pancreas, and all they needed to do was open me up and cut that off, and I will be fine. But I want to tell you, during the days of hearing that first diagnosis of cancer on the pancreas to where the surgery took place, I was terrified. Whether it's a cancer surgery, or learning to swim, or the fear of facing a new job, or of entering into a new marriage, or of entering into a new relationship, there is anxiety, there is fear. And we wonder, what is the worst thing that can happen? And we need to face that.
Over the past 9 to 10 months, this church has faced its own series of fears, the sudden and unexpected departure of the senior minister, the vote to become a reconciling church, which you did vote for, and some distrust of the system of the United Methodist Church. Surely the loss of control, the uncertainty about a new pastor, financial difficulties, some concern that First United Methodist Church may actually fold. And you may have your own list of situations that wake you up in the middle of the night.
Face the worst. We need to be realistic. We need to be honest about what the worst possibilities are. Whatever trouble or stress or duress we face, we need to confront it squarely and completely. We cannot use denial mechanisms to imagine it away or pretend it to be something other than it is. Today, the threat of terrorism is real. That little spot can be a killing cancer. Our life savings can vanish. Those we love can betray us. The dream of a lifetime can be shattered. Face the worst. But to stop there is a counsel for despair. And so we move on to the next step. Believe the best. Say that with me. Believe the best. What are the resources that we have available for us to help us through?
Well, if it's swimming, one of the resources is believing that the water can hold you up if you don't fight against it.
And if it's surgery, you trust and believe the skill, the background, the experience of the doctors and the nurses and those who practice healing ministries. If it's the church, we believe that God will see us through, that the presence of God's Holy Spirit is with us in our midst. We trust and believe in the community of faith, loving and caring relationships that support us and hold us and never let us go.
God has led this church through the wind, through the storm for 136 years, including the earthquake of '92. I know that you are a faithful people who know well the journey from surviving by the skin of your teeth to moving to thriving, even in the midst of the storm. For 136 years, God has held this church in the palm of God's hand and has been the wind beneath your wings. I know, as the staff person in the conference office on Euclid in 1992, that I was the one who met with the FEMA team weekly, who met with UMCOR, the United Methodist Committee on Relief, on a daily basis. They moved from all over the country and just set up shop here in Pasadena and in our conference office. And so I learned that this church was so resourceful in addressing the difficulties that you faced after the earthquake. The dislocation, the chaos, the changes, the insurance, the unexpected movement that you had to arrange and manage in the church. In order to bring this church back up to code, you could have added your own verse: when the storms of life are raging, First United Methodist Church has faith to make it through. And I give thanks for that.
Believe the best. Believe that God is at work. Believe the Apostle Paul when he says, nothing in all creation can separate us from God and from God's love that holds us and never lets us go. The third part of the formula is do the most. Say that with me. Do the most. The law of holiness, as well as the law of wholeness, is that strong emotions and convictions have to issue forth in appropriate actions.
Our faith enables us to let go of reproach, accusation, complaining, all of those sort of easy answers. But our faith enables us to turn towards God, to see that God is opening us to something new. As the prophet Isaiah says, "Behold, I am doing a new thing. Do you not see it? It is happening here among you." God moves us to go the second mile and the third mile, to encourage one another, to forgive and to move on, listening to one another and to God. As we move into a new future, God's vision is calling us into the future.
Albert Schweitzer said, "However much concerned I was at the problem of the misery of the world, I never let myself get lost in brooding over it. I always held firmly to the thought that each one of us can do a little to bring some portion of it to an end."
And so we believe with the Apostle Paul, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me."
Face the worst, believe the best, do the most. All that's very well and good. But the simple fact remains, however, that for most of the typical storms and crises in which you and I find ourselves, crises in interpersonal relationships, in difficult business dealings, in matters of physical and emotional health, in community and civic activities, in adjusting church ministries and management, and certainly in international relationships, sooner or later all of us are bound to be confronted with the fact that do the most we can, there is infinitely more to be done than we can do. We may do all we can, but loose ends remain, and dreams sag, and much stands undone, and we don't have the vaguest idea how to do more. And so we learn another lesson. Leave the rest. Say that. Leave the rest. In order to be able to do all we can, we must be willing to admit that we can't do it all.
You probably know the classic prayer written in 1943 by Reinhold Niebuhr that some of you have tacked on your bulletin boards or you carry around in your pocket. It has stood the test of time. That prayer is, "God, give me the grace to accept the serenity of the things that cannot be changed, the courage to change the things which should be changed, and the wisdom to distinguish the one from the other." Just about all of us this morning, whatever our age or situation, could use this prayer in our lives. We don't know what the future holds, but we do know the one who holds the future. So we trust Jesus. "Lo, I am with you always."
In the Gardner Museum in Boston, there's a painting by Rembrandt entitled "The Storm on the Sea of Galilee." It's Rembrandt's interpretation of the scene from the Gospel of Mark. It shows the disciples in panic as their small vessel is being lifted by a huge wave. Two of the disciples are rushing to the back of the stern of the boat where Jesus is asleep. But there's something very strange about the painting. You count the figures in the boat, and there are 14. But there should only be 13, 12 disciples and Jesus. That's 13. But there's 14. And then you examine it more closely and notice that one of the men in the boat is Rembrandt. Rembrandt has painted himself into that picture.
Rembrandt caught the true meaning of the frightening experience of the Sea of Galilee. All of us are in this boat together, and storms do come up quite suddenly that we don't expect. They blow around our boat and cause us to be fearful. A peaceful journey without stories is not guaranteed us, but Jesus has promised to be in the boat with us during any kind of a storm, to calm every storm and to lift our faith. So the final word from the Gospel of Mark Jesus is in the boat with us, and we are not alone. Peace be still around the calmed waters, and the fears of the disciples are calmed. This morning, I would invite you to join Ken and I in a statement of faith that is found in your hymnal. It's number 509. We know that the church that sings together makes enough harmony together to get through any storm. We are going to attempt to sing the first verse together. You're still praying, aren't you? And then we're going to invite you to sing the second verse with us, number 509, and we're going to do it a cappella, so we're going to all get in this boat together.
And this is our last chance at ministerial harmony. We promise.
Jesus, Savior, pilot,